Josh, crises are defining events. How do you think this crisis, the pandemic, is going to redefine the economy, financial markets, politics perhaps, and maybe even our whole society?
This is a much more deep, more difficult crisis. It started with a health crisis. And people are dying, have died, they've gotten sick. It then went to a economic crisis, and we've got 14% unemployment, and now we're getting to a social unrest, and really an outcry with the murder of George Floyd against the systemic racism that's occurring in our country. And so for all of those reasons is a very difficult crisis. And I think it is going to redefine many, many things. And what I'm hoping is that you can create some positive change out of this. And I think all of us as business leaders, it's incumbent on us to speak out, to speak up, and to take actions that allow for particularly the income inequality that exists in this country, as well as the racism that exists, to make positive change and to eliminate as much of that as we can.
How long does it take the economy to properly recover? And when I'm talking about properly recovering, I mean for companies, right, whose revenue and EBITDA have vanished, right, to become profitable again. Are we talking about a year? Are we talking about 2 years? Are we talking about 5 years?
Think that we're somewhere between 3 and 7 years. The stock market is building in a return to the 2019 GDP earnings in 2021. That's the median estimate. The estimates are all over the place, but the median estimate is that 2021 is the same as 2019. And we at Apollo we think that is aggressive. We don't see that. We think the markets are a little bit divorced from the fundamental economy.
Based on what you just told me, if you were, would you be shorting the stock market?
I would not be shorting the stock market. And certainly we do look at the stock market in the following sense. I think that what's driving the stock market today is the massive amount of government response, particularly the Fed's quantitative easing.
If you're right, and the outlook for the economy is more dismal than it was after the financial crisis, can that last?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of risk in the stock market today. I think that number one, earnings, as I talked about. Number two, no one knows. The U.S. and China, may very well decouple, and the relationship between those two parties being stable is very important to the world. And then number three, you've got the pandemic. We're still not out of the woods as to second level effects or a kick up in some of the pandemic, and then you have the political environment, which is very volatile and very not necessarily helpful. So I think all those things could affect the stock market. And so the real question is, how long will the government intervention go on? And if you're out there looking at the stock market, you have to really ask yourself, when does the Fed get tired of supporting the market? And the market will, at that point, really go down unless fundamentals vastly pick up.
Traditionally, Josh, an economic collapse of this magnitude creates opportunities for investors like Apollo.
Yep.
I wonder, has the Fed deprived you of that opportunity by acting with such extraordinary speed and force to restore confidence?
We have 350 billion of assets today, and we have many opportunities to be the lifeline to companies all over the U.S. and all over the world, and so the Fed money certainly has made it harder. But since we're generally off the run, we've been able to really get involved.
So the opportunities you thought were going to materialize have in fact materialized. They haven't been you know, displaced
Well,
by Fed stimulus?
it's been affected by it, but we spent over 50. We bought $50 billion of debt in the first month and a half of the crisis, and and we lent some of the bigger things. We lent to companies like Expedia, world-class companies, companies like Albertson, world-class companies, very large supermarket chain, and they had access to other liquidity, but for example, they didn't necessarily want to have the restrictions